Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for joining me on another edition of CBT Now, right here at the CBT Automotive Network. Joining me now to give us an update on the current state of the auto market, tariffs, and broader economic indicators is Erin Keating, who's the executive analyst at Cox Automotive. Thank you so much, Erin, for taking the time out of your schedule there. I believe you're calling in from Dallas today, so I hope your trip is going well, but thank you for taking the time with us. So let's start with the big picture. How would you describe the state of the automotive market right now?
Well, it's a good question. And thanks for having me, Jim. Always great to be with you. We did see a lot of quote unquote froth come into the market right after we heard the tariff announcements, March 26th. So we saw those last 5 days in March spike. We saw that we got to a 17.8 million SAR in March. And then in April, we've now revealed a 17.3 million. So sales stayed pretty high and elevated through those first couple of weeks of April and have started to taper off just a bit. Inventory continues to slide, so we have not seen a ton of replenishment of vehicles that are being sold off the lots. Used vehicles are also, diminishing in supply. Pricing is seeming to hold, so it's a little bit of a mixed up picture because I think everyone's sitting there waiting for the other shoe to fall. hasn't quite fallen.
No.
We see a decent demand. If we were not anticipating anything happening in the back half of the year, we'd be on pace at a 16.6, which is a little bit above what we had forecasted. So
yeah. It's funny because in spite of everything,
right.
16.6 is a very formidable number, right? I mean,
sure.
We're back to almost pre-pandemic numbers in terms of volume on new cars. Right.
Yes. So that doesn't speak about the volatility and the uncertainty that everyone's feeling.
Right.
So it's, I think that's why it's a little confusing for everyone because a lot of people do feel very confused and uncertain about what exactly is going to happen. But the numbers just aren't showing us that yet.
A number of the dealers that I've spoken with in around the 10th of April had said, well, we're starting to see a little bit of a downturn from March and it's not the same as March. And then I spoke to them again at the end of April and they said, oh, no, scratch that. We had a phenomenal April. Not all of them, but many of them said we had a great April. And of course, the numbers are kind of shaking that out there. So what effects, if any, are we seeing yet in new or used vehicle pricing as it relates to tariffs?
So I think we're seeing, every OEM has said they're not going to adjust their MSRP just yet. So we know that we have a hold on sort of what that post-tariff price tag is going to be based on the effects of the tariffs. But what we have seen is that local dynamic pop up with supply and demand, more people coming into the showroom, more pricing power with the dealers, as well as we've seen a slight decline in incentives and discounting. So the list price is slightly elevated, but again, that's sort of it's due to some incentives pulling back as well as a little bit more demand being pulled forward and that pricing dynamic getting easier for the seller side of the equation.
Yeah, I could see that. With April's SAR dipping slightly, get back for that for a second, how should dealers view this? In what context for the rest of 2025? Is that kind of the canary in the coal mine?
So, what's interesting to us is we did a whole sentiment survey as well. And I've looked at a couple of other sentiment surveys around the tariffs. And it was about 50% of people saying they weren't going to do anything differently. And then 50% of them said they were going to do something differently. But 50% of those said, I'm going to pull ahead. 50% of those said, I'm going to stay behind. So at the end of the day, I feel like we kind of had a nothing effect there. It sort of stayed the course, right? Whoever was going to pull ahead was sort of wiping out those that were going to hold. So, we're all waiting to figure out what's going to happen here with a potential recession. We still have our estimate at 40% chance of recession coming in the second half of the year. But again, the labor market is steady Eddie or at least than we expected. Inflation is coming down just ever so slightly. We don't see the numbers quite yet when it's going to hit. We're all still anticipating it. We're being cautious to say that we're not thinking this is going to go on an uphill swing for the rest of the year, but it's just not there yet. So I think dealers need to be seeing this continually as a place to keep an eye out for that market share, keep an eye out, keep pressing. This isn't necessarily a time to pull back. You still have decent inventory on the lot. We're not down to 2022 numbers or 2020 2021 and 2022 numbers.
Yeah.
So I think, dealers should hold tight and hold the consumers accountable for those that are in the market.
That's right. And in 2022, we saw a SAR at, around 13 million, but
Right.
we saw gross profits and net profits through the roof. In fact, it was a record year for that. So
Right.
it could very well be too that we do see a lower unit count and a lower SAR. However, it could be that the profits also increase substantially because of the consumers being concerned about, tariffs and what have you, right?
Yeah, I mean, profitability, there's a couple of different things that are going to impact that, right? Depending on how the automakers decide to deal with the cost increases, there's the perception amongst consumers, and then there's the perception amongst dealers, right? To keep consumers interested, they're going to want to keep those MSRPs pretty competitive, which means that they might be shifting on invoice, which of course could impact dealer profitability. And then again, if people are starting to feel tighter, which we are seeing, consumer sentiment is down, consumer spending is flat, there could be less ability for people to pay the higher prices, but we're still doing, relatively good. I think last year we kept joking this is the fourth most profitable year for dealers. We're still hanging in there, and there's still pent up demand.
Right. So all in all, things are good in retail automotive for sure. There's some things to watch and some things out there, but no sense ringing the panic button yet, right?
Right, correct. And again, I think it's the time to really capitalize on what dealers know best. What do they have on the lots? What can their customers bear? What opportunities do they have to go and grab market share from perhaps who might be low on inventory, right? So if you know someone down the street's running a little bit low on supply and you have an opportunity to capture that lead, be looking out for those opportunities and educate your customers on it.
That's right. And lo and behold, like we saw during the pandemic, fixed ops goes through the roof because people are now spending more on the cars that they're keeping. They're keeping them longer. We also see, used car sales increase as well because of the new car pricing. So all in all, as I said, things are pretty good. So Erin Keating, executive analyst for Cox Automotive. Thank you so much once again for joining us on the show. Very much appreciated. Enjoy the conference that you are at, and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Great. Thanks, Jim.
Great. Thank you.